year, Pitchside's taken you on an action-packed tour of the region's teams. From the City Ground to Field Mill, we've seen it all, but in traditional fashion, we've saved the best till last, as the final stop of our footballing journey takes us to Villa Park to speak to the former England, Watford and Aston Villa manager Graham Taylor. With the European Championships currently taking place without the country that invented the game, Pitchside spoke to Graham about the state of English football.
I think the business of whether there's a lack of quality in young English players, it has to be geared to exactly what is it that we do expect. I mean, simply by putting an academy system together doesn't suddenly create 50 more great youngsters. You know, it's the great players, the ones where it comes so natural to, in effect, they're just there. No system really produces them. It's the ones who are just below that greatness that need improving, need to work, need to practice on things. How many of those are we actually producing? Because the academy system has now been in existence, I don't know, 11 years. I would say we're not producing as many as we thought we would. I honestly feel that the academy system should be continually under review. The problem that it has now, I don't think that anybody really knows who's in charge of it. When it first came out, the feeling was that the Football Association were basically responsible for the academy system. Now it looks, and I'm quite prepared to be corrected on this, but as far as I'm aware now, it depends which league you're operating in. So if you're a Premier League side and you have your academy system running, if you were not to be granted a further licence, that would be down to the Premier League clubs. It wouldn't be down to the Football Association. I think there's so much that needs looking at there and needs straightening out so that we're all aware of exactly what our responsibilities are and who we're reporting to and who's in charge of us. Once again, you know, as has happened since the formation of the Premier League, certainly, but also then the breakaway which produces what is now the Football League. It would appear that with those two bodies and the Football Association, we seem to have three bodies that somehow have an interest in the academies, but yet none of them seem to have the total responsibility for being accountable. When the Premiership was formed, going right to the top level, the idea as to why the Football Association would back it was that it was meant to be 18 clubs. People forget this. Now 18 clubs would have took the games down to the full-time professionals to 34 in a season as opposed to 42. The FA, to their eternal shame I think, allowed the clubs to get away with keeping the club at 22. And they did that for the first 3 years of the Premiership, so there was no reduction in games played. Yes, it's now down to 20, but originally it should have been 18. And the whole idea of that was to help the England international side, that fewer club games, 8 less club games, would mean you'd be able to get the international side together. They wouldn't have been playing so many games, and the feeling was that that would have been an advantage. That never happened. Now if you now take that right down the levels, we're playing too much football. We don't practice enough. Well, it certainly is going to be a problem. It already is. If you look at some of the nationalities of the boys in academies, it's a big problem because the European Union law, I think, will prevent, if the academies say, you know, you can't come in because you're not English, I think, you know, a case will soon go to law and that will be proved that that wouldn't be the case. But the whole original idea of the academy was for the improvement of young English talent. It wasn't for the improvement of young foreign talent. But if we then add that to the situation where at the start of the present season only 38% of the Premiership players were English, then you'll see the problem that the national side is having. Those people who feel that the England national team cannot become a second-rate footballing nation, they have to be very careful about that. There's a belief that, you know, that would never happen. One could argue with non-qualification for a European Championship, and certainly since the breakup of the European community you would never expect England not to qualify. But one would say, well, we haven't qualified there. And if you look at this, we have to be extremely wary about where we are going. The Premier League is a commercial organisation that has been absolutely fantastically successful. But the commercial league, the Premier League, has no consideration or responsibilities for the England international side. And so we have our main league now with 62% of players being foreign and 11 of the 20 clubs owned by foreign owners. That must tell us something. I think the problem is one has to look at the sort of under-21 side, the England under-21 side, the England under-19 side, and it will say to you there that, yeah, we can see one or two players in there, but when they go back to their clubs, they're not playing in the first team because the very expensive foreign players are there. So I'm not saying that we don't have some talented youngsters, we do. And we'll always have some talented youngsters. But in fact, they're being prevented to have their runs in the first teams because of so many foreign players that we have in this country. Now, that doesn't now just apply to the Premier League. If you look at the Championship, they have their quota of foreign players as well. Now, there is the argument, look, if the English players are good enough, well, they'd be there, wouldn't they? Well, if they're not good enough, surely we should be looking at our whole system. I think the value of a youth system at any club football is very important, but it's the people who work in those youth systems. You can talk about youth systems all of the time, but at the end of the day, it's the people that are employed and their commitment. At Watford, I had a young man called Tom Wally, a former player. He was absolutely first class. He wanted youngsters. He was like, it was his own family. And here at Aston Villa, they have, in my opinion, certainly it's in the top three, the academy, because the people that work for them, Gordon Cowans, Tony McAndrew, Kevin McDonald, led by the academy director Brian Jones, they have an enthusiasm for youth football for them to do well. Now, without that enthusiasm and that commitment, you're not going to have a successful youth system. And here at the Villa, they have a very, very good one. I think part of the problem, a major problem the Football Association have, is that they've almost, should I say, the most powerful organisation seems to be the Premiership clubs. And in many respects, the Football Association, who are the governing body of football in this country, they're responsible for the education, they have the authority, they're responsible for the development of the game. I think that they have to be prepared to be much stronger in their negotiations and their dealings with the clubs, because without that the clubs will just go their own way. And the top clubs themselves, as I said earlier, already have 11 of them with foreign owners. You only need 15 votes in the Premiership to change the rulings. Now, we could have 4 or 5 more foreign owners and the whole rulings of the Premier League could be changed. So this business about global football and taking the 39th game to all parts of the world, it may not be finished yet, particularly if we get more foreign owners.
So there you have it, the final whistle's blown on Pitchside, but we'll be back next season with a fresh new lineup. From everyone here at Pitchside, you've been the best.